Everybody has that story to tell. The memory hangs out in the backseat of your mind, waiting for the right moment to chip in the group and share your childhood fear. The first time you were scared, the first time you felt real fear. By the time you tell a story, you almost forgot it had ever happened. Maybe it was just a fever dream you had as a child. Maybe the circumstances were fabricated by your adolescent imagination. Even though you doubt it ever happened, the memory still lingers, held dearer than what should have been your cherished moments when you were younger. When you think back, you don't remember the first time you tied your shoes or the first basketball hoop you made. You think of that story. It's there, waiting, almost as if it has unfinished business with you, like you're not allowed to move on from it yet. And you tell the story with a big smile on your face, the ones around you laughing so hard they ugly cry because your experience was so real and relatable. It could have happened to them just as easily as it happened to you. Once you've shared it, you feel better. And the memory retreats back to its den, hibernating until the stars align and it can torment you once more. I was at work when the opportunity presented itself. The night shift was over, and we were all in the locker room exchanging thick uniforms and heavy boots for Crocs and basketball shorts. Terry was telling a story about his fear of rats, his face a half grin as he struggled to get through it without laughing. I was on the bench, unlacing my boots. Dude, I've been looking for this fucking rat for a week. I would always see it out of the corner of my eye, the little bastard scurrying around while I was trying to sleep. Turns out it had made a nest in the box spring. I've been sleeping on it, dude, Terry says, shivering as he thought back. The other guys laughed, a cackling chorus of grown men amused by someone else's demise. I laughed as well. Terry was well known for his fear of rodents, and was heckled about it constantly. They went back and forth over the details as I kicked off my boots. How do they deal with it? Do they burn the mattress? Did he let it sleep there forever? As the laughter dies down, I think of my story and wonder if I should tell it. At first I shiver at the thought, but before I know it, I'm grinning myself and dying to let it out. The old memory resurfaces like a shark from the deep. A story that happened 23 years ago. A story about a beaver. All right, I got one. Terry, you'll especially like this, I say, standing up. The guys listen, still wiping the tears from the rat in Terry's mattress. It's been so long since I've thought of the beaver, and the details flood in as I picture it in my head. All right, so this was a really long time ago when I was a kid. I think I was 5 or 6. Anyway, I used to live in this trailer park over on Rainbow Road. That one over there by the highway? I vaguely point north as I close my locker. There's a few interjections before the story continues. Wait, Rainbow Road? Yeah, I know that place. My aunt used to live there. Used to live in the cans, Jay? Over by 94? Yeah, a long time ago. Been ages, I say. And resume the story. Anyway, it was in the summer back in the 90s, and we were all playing outside. Not shit to do. There was nothing but trailers and a long line of mailboxes. We were all poor, and there was no playground to play at, so most of the time, all the kids would just group up, and we would walk around and play with rocks and shit. We'd walk around all day, and our parents didn't care as long as we didn't go by the highway. They were always worried about a car hitting us, I say, and in my mind, I can hear the sounds of cars passing by. So there's like 5 of us playing by this trailer that didn't have anyone living in it. And all of a sudden, one of the kids just freezes and says, what's that? So we all look, and sitting on the porch of the trailer is this big fucking beaver, just staring at us, I say. The beaver's black eyes and teeth clear in my mind. I shudder at the thought of it. The guys laugh, and Terry visibly cringes. So we're all frozen there, all of us, too scared to move. We'd never seen one before. We're all terrified of this beaver. And it's just staring us down. We're just waiting for it to rush us, like it was gonna eat our bones or something. Really scary shit. Anyway, so there's this girl standing next to me. I think her name was Kirsten? She whispers to me and says, "Go get your mom, we'll stay here." My house was the closest, only 2 trailers away. So I run home, thinking this beaver's gonna chase me like it's some kind of horror movie or something, and I run and I tell my mom, and she starts yelling about us playing by the highway, and the whole time I'm just scared shitless this beaver is gonna eat my friends by the time we go back. No shit. What happened? Did it attack you guys? One of the guys says, and I laugh. No, my mom grabbed the broom, we went back, and she pretty much just shoot it off, but I still can't shake the look that beaver gave us. We really thought it was gonna eat us. Like, fucking hate beavers, dude. I finished the story and they all laughed. All except Terry, who looks like he found something new to add to his list of rodent fears. I chuckled to myself at the thought of the memory, feeling a bit of the weight lift from my mind, like a shred of the trauma is healed. After some brief shit-talking, we all punch out and leave the building, everyone walking to their cars with their heads held high. Now that the day's work is done, I wave goodbye and get in my car. As I watch the other guys pull away and drive off, I find myself sitting there in silence, pondering the story I told. I think of the beaver story with its nasty buck teeth and black eyes. I think of how funny it is looking back, and I hear the laughter of the guys in my head. The longer I think about it, the more the laughter fades away and the more I hear screams instead. I think of the story, suddenly feeling guilty, wondering why I said it in the first place. Maybe after all this time, I'm just trying to make myself feel better. In my head, the memory unravels. I think of the story and how it's a lie. There's no beaver. There never was. I lean my head on the steering wheel. I hadn't thought of it in so long, I was sure that I could leave it in the past. I hear the screams. My own screams and those of the other children. I think of the unexplainable memory pushed so far back in my mind. Kirsten was my first crush. I remember her freckled face and short hair and a little red ball cap she would always wear. Everyone thought she looked like a boy, but I thought she was pretty, even though I really didn't know the meaning of the word. She lived across the park in a yellow trailer and would always come over to play when all the kids got together. There were 5 of us and only a few of us had bikes, so if we all wanted to play together, we would usually walk around and play with sticks and stuff like that. Sometimes we'd play tag or Red Rover, but that day we found ourselves just walking around bored. The trailer park was an oval formation, the mobile homes placed in a loop with a circular road in the middle. It was surrounded by trees except for the side I lived on that was tucked into a hill that the highway was built on. It was nice outside that day, and our parents booted all of us out of the house so we would enjoy the nice weather, and so they could have some peace and quiet. They only had 2 rules: don't talk to strangers, and don't go near the highway. The park wasn't fenced off or anything, and you could hear cars and trucks flying past all day long. We were walking the road in a little group and doing laps without any real plan. We continued like this for a while, every time passing each other's houses and telling jokes, sometimes nagging our parents if we could come in yet. 2 trailers down from mine was the only vacant lot in the park. Nobody lived there as far as we knew. The driveway was always empty, with a concrete slab in place of a trailer. The backyard consisted of an uphill climb through the trees that led straight to the highway. It was silly, but between the emptiness of the vacant trailer and the sounds of the highway, it felt like that specific lot was separate from the rest of the park. I don't know if it was the shade from the overgrown trees, the layer of old pine needles on the ground, or the dead sticks scattered about the unkempt yard. There was always something about it, like it was in its own little bubble. And that was when the dares started. On that particular boring day, one of the kids had the idea that for every lap we took around the park, one of us would have to step foot on the lot. The mini barren zone always gave us the willies, and the thought of pushing the boundaries of the scary property gave us all a shot of rebellious adrenaline. At first I thought it was scary. and I was worried about getting in trouble. But when I saw Kirsten perk up giddily, I decided to play along so I could impress her. Whatever I could do to seem cool and make her smile. It felt like we were doing something bad, and the excitement of who would go the furthest would hurry us along as we walked each lap around the park. We would take turns. Each lap, one of us would walk into the driveway, the next would go up and touch one of the sticks, etc., etc. I remember on one of my turns, I crept into the yard behind the little driveway and sprinted back, comically yelling like something was chasing me all the way back to the road. Looking back, it was immature, but it felt like the unexplainable gloom was always trying to nip at your heels. Hours passed as we repeated the cycle. A lap around the park, then one of us running in. There, towards the end, we were jogging around the park, all of us excited to take our next turn. As time went on, kids would get called to come back home, and the group began to dwindle. We started to push faster, each of us paranoid to be the next kid to be walking away from the fun with our head hung low as the others laughed. Before we knew it, almost everyone had gone home. Everyone except Kirsten and I. I remember it being my turn next, and the both of us running back to do one more stunt. The sun was starting to set, and we knew any minute our parents would call us. I remember running alongside her, sweating and gasping for breath as the laps tired our legs. Kirsten huffed and laughed as she ran, holding the bill of her ball cap so it wouldn't fly off. This one would be the craziest, I thought. It was my chance to really impress her. I would go into the woods this time, maybe even close to the highway. When we came to the driveway, however, we both stopped. Our smiles faded, and the sun seemed to fizzle away in an instant. There was an old rundown trailer on the vacant lot, like it had appeared out of thin air. The dingy green paint was peeling, and the porch looked like it was about to collapse. The drapes in the windows were nicotine-stained and ratty, barely concealing the complete darkness within. As I watched, the front door creaked open slightly. From the darkness within, a groaning whisper escaped. No lights on inside, no car in the driveway. What the? I looked at Kirsten for validation, but she wasn't even looking at the trailer. She was looking at a woman in the yard. It was then I noticed her, off towards the trees. She was standing with her back turned, and even though we couldn't see her face, we knew something was horribly wrong. Once white clothes were heavily stained and ripped up, fitting awkwardly on her frame. One of her legs was bent backwards, and one of her arms was missing, a heavy drizzle of blood oozing from the stump. Despite how mangled she was, she stood perfectly still. We just stood there for a time, both of us silently gawking at her. The air was chilly, like a temperature drop before a bad storm. Kirsten looked at me, the color drained from her face. Without a word, both of us looked in the direction of our homes, to see which one was closest to run to. When we looked back in the direction of the woman, we noticed she had silently moved closer. Her back was still turned, but we could see the damage clearer. Horribly road-rashed muscle, black streaks on her clothing from the combination of tires and asphalt. "What do we do?" Kirsten whispered, her voice a whimper. I don't know," I managed, my bladder suddenly feeling like it was going to burst. I remember my legs shaking. "Maybe we could..." Ahead of us, the woman turned. Not in a normal sense, but like she blinked to facing a different direction, like someone had flipped the paper over while our eyes were closed. The sight of her face provoked a gasp from both of us. I was crying now, filled with the confused fear you have when you wake up from a terrible nightmare. The woman was missing her bottom jaw, and with it, half of her upper face. The only identifiable thing left of her top jaw was a hanging bloody tongue and her 2 front teeth. A single eye looked at me angrily, the pupil surrounded by the black splotching of burst blood vessels. No sound emitted from the woman, but seeing the way she stood there, frozen in place, I couldn't explain it. Something was just wrong. Horribly wrong. "Your house is closer. Run, get your mom, Kirsten whispered, her voice trembling. Her breath came out as fog. The mangled woman remained in place, but her single eye was locked on Kirsten now. Before our eyes, she blinked forward, 3 feet closer in Kirsten's direction. I wanted to reach for her hand, but it seemed so far away. I looked at her freckled face, tears streaming down them as she stood as still as possible. But, I whimpered, and the mangled woman blinked again, a few more feet, facing my direction. Without a single sound, the eye glared angrily at me. I sobbed as she grew closer once more, her eye dilated in response to my noise, and at her side, her only remaining hand twitched. "Just go!" Kirsten's shout echoed across the park, rustling birds from the trees. I turned and ran. My shoes skipping down the sidewalk. I couldn't breathe. I looked over my shoulder, the terrified look on Kirsten's face, and the woman shifting closer, burning itself into my memory. Even as she drew closer to her, Kirsten kept her eyes on me, weeping silently as she watched me go, as she made sure I could get away. My house was only a few trailers away, but I felt like I was running across town. My legs were weak, my thoughts raced. The further I got from the yard, the warmer it seemed to get. The sun began to feel hot, but my blood was still cold. I tried to focus on the patio door to my home where my mom would be inside, where I could get her to save us. The adrenaline crawled across me like ice, and I thought just for a moment that everything was going to be okay. It was all just a nightmare. My mom would show up and fix things just like she did all the other times I had a problem. By the time I made it to my yard, Kirsten screamed. The shrill cry of terror and pain made me stumble, and I fell to the ground. I looked behind me frantically, but Kirsten and the woman were gone. All I could see was an empty yard, and I started shaking. I looked to my front door, then back to where I left Kirsten. I didn't know what to do. I thought it would take too much time to get my mom. I shook and sobbed on the ground as my adolescent brain tried to compute the right thing to do. I just wanted to help. I wanted her to be okay. In my fear, I wet myself. Behind me, Kirsten screamed again. She was getting further away. I got back on my feet and I ran back to the phantom trailer, cursing myself for leaving her alone. We should have just ran together. Why didn't we just run together? No, I sobbed, my stomach desperately wanting to purge its contents. My legs begged me to stop, but I pushed them forward. My sneakers scuffed the sidewalk as the hot trail of urine ran down my leg. I ran past the neighbor's lot and rounded the corner of the trailer that shouldn't exist. When I got to the yard, I couldn't see either of them. The same awful chill returned, and a mist was working its way across the yard. My eyes followed the source. A ghostly fog that was cascading down the porch steps. It was spilling from the trailer. The tiny crack of the door and the darkness inside. The doorway groaned as the fog billowed out, widening slightly with a creak. The window started to bleed, and the shutters shriveled like burning plastic. The worst thing of all was what I saw in the trees. The woman was dragging Kirsten by her arm, painfully whipping her around each time she blinked up the tree, dragging her towards the highway. I screamed for her to stop. The mangled woman paused only for a moment, her destroyed mouth reverberating with what I could only describe as a snarl. Kirsten howled in pain as she clawed at the woman, the bruising grip worsening as her helpless hands passed through a seemingly ethereal body. Unnatural and horrible, the mangled woman ascended the hill, each freeze-frame blink bringing them closer to the roaring traffic. I ran after them. I made it halfway across the yard before my foot caught something, sending me face first into the foggy ground. My palm slapped the ground, softening the fall on something rough and sharp. I tried to get up, but something grabbed my ankle, winding tight like rope as I tried to shake it free. Kirsten's screams got weaker the further she got from me. The fog dispersed as I thrashed to be free, and though I saw no grass at all, the canvas of pine needles and leaves was replaced by hundreds, thousands of dead birds. I looked behind me and shouted for help, hoping to see my mom or one of the neighbors rushing to help. I saw nothing but an empty street. and twisting vines wrapping around my ankles. When I turned back to the hill, Kirsten was holding onto a tree, trying to resist the mangled woman's grip. Her fingers clung to the bark and her sneakers formed jagged ruts in the earth. This slowed the woman for a moment, but she retaliated by breaking Kirsten's wrist. The wet snap followed by the worst sound I'd ever heard. I wanted to say I broke free. Sometimes when I dream, I break free from the vines, and I make it through the fog. Other times, grown-ups show up and everything's okay. Sometimes Kirsten has the strength to free herself, and we get away together, and sometimes there's no mangled woman at all. It's only a beaver. In reality, the true ending can never be denied. The version where my scream only joins hers. Scream as I reach helplessly and the mangled woman makes it to the road. I watch as the truck takes them. An impact so forceful and sudden, they simply blink away, leaving nothing but streaks on the highway, and a hat in the wind that matched the color. The fog recedes into the trailer like a movie being rewound. The blood seeps back into the glass, and the curtains unshrivel. The warmth returns, and the parents flock outside, mortified and speechless as they press me for answers. In time, my screaming fades, replaced by the howling of sirens in the distance. I look up from the steering wheel and dry my tears. The parking lot is empty, and everyone else has left for work except me. I think of the images in my head. The weeping eyes I can't unsee. Cries I can't seem to forget. When I start my car and shift out of park, I think about the years that have passed by. I think of how I never really spoke to my friends again after that day, and how everyone seemed to chalk it up to two kids who were never supposed to play by the highway. The park seemed to fall apart after that. Kirsten's parents moving first with my family to follow. I heard some sort of mass exodus followed. A tiny little poor park, reduced to nothing but a memory to the nearby bars of traveling truckers. Another traffic accident. Another poor child lost. Tonight, instead of taking my usual route, I took a detour. I take the expressway until I see a road. One so ignored and unkempt you wouldn't know it was there if it wasn't for the reflecting green sign. A sign faded and almost illegible with age. A sign that reads, Rainbow Road. I turn onto the winding path, one that feels more like the entrance to a cemetery than a back road. My car rolls over broken pavement and traverses potholes until I see something in the distance. The only landmark in the otherwise empty place that's been consumed by weeds and overgrowth. As I approach the line of old, rusted mailboxes, I slow down. Ahead is the concrete circle. But there's no homes. Only a loop that's been slowly swallowed by the forest surrounding it. My headlights cut through the unnatural dark, the special kind that engulfs in the middle of nowhere. I think of a hot summer's day, and a bunch of bored kids with nothing to do. Letting my car idly crawl, I pull into the loop and survey my surroundings. On Rainbow Road, there are no mobile units to be seen. Each passing slab of the empty lot looks like a gravestone, a gritty reminder of young little lives that will be forever changed. I pass by Kirsten's old lot, think of her freckled face, the way she laughed, and the way she would roll her eyes when I made stupid jokes. I passed by the old lots of my friends' houses and wondered where they're at in the world. I passed by the lot where my home used to be, and I think of my mother. A time before the therapy I went through. A time before she started talking less and less. Driving past the old vacant lot, I see no mangled woman and no green trailer. Only the light of cars flying by the highway on the hill beyond. I look at this one longer, expecting to see something more, something of meaning. I look over the weathered surface of its foundation, years of rain slowly chipping away at the concrete. The grass that's overtaken the driveway, the thin layer of gravel reclaimed by earth. I stare into the trees, I look at every wicked branch in the night, I search for those twisted limbs and malformed face and wonder if it's hiding somewhere in there. I listen for the screams and find cicadas instead. Nothing but empty lots, overgrown grass, and fleeting rodents. When I reach the end of the circle, I see the exit and stop. I see the winding road and how it's been so long since I've been here. How I'll have no reason to come back. I let off the brake and I keep turning left, going over the same vacant spaces again. But this time, I think of the good times. I think of every dare that didn't end in tragedy. I think of every boring summer day where we climbed trees or played tag. I think of every smile Kirsten made and how it would give me butterflies in my stomach. When I reach the end of the circle, I decide to go again. My head filled with laughter and smiles, the kind no longer thought by a late 20s man. And that one's through, it leads to another, and another. Each passing tree in a remembered backyard spawning memories long buried under the surface and lost long gone. Memories deserving remembrance. I kept on the loop for a while, holding the same angle on the wheel as I drove in a circle into the late hours of the night. I thought of many memories, reliving them like they were yesterday. Until something changed. A flashing strobe was blinding and unexpected, and part of me wondered how I didn't even see it coming in the first place. The squad car may have followed me with its lights off for a while, and I was none the wiser. I pulled my car over right in front of where my old house used to be. Putting it in park, I sighed as he ran my plates. The cop took their time, both of our engines running idly in the middle of nowhere. When they finally emerged from their car, I had my license and registration ready. I rolled down the window in time to see an old officer, headlights illuminating a mustached face, white with age. When I offered my paperwork, he waved it off with a question. "What are you doing out here this time of night, kid? Getting high, getting drunk?" he asked impatiently, as he looked inside my car. "No, just, visiting an old friend, I guess," I said. And he blinked at me. "Very funny. You know how many times I get called out here? Look, you kids come out here screwing around, shooting up, causing trouble. There's no reason for it. I thought maybe after they set fire to the last trailer out of here, we leveled it with the bulldozer. And that'd be the end of it. Now you're here driving circles until dispatch picks it up. There ain't nothing out here, kid. Either you're lying or you got the wrong address," he said sternly, his frown curving his mustache. "She passed away a long time ago. She was hit by a truck on the highway," I said. And there was an immediate sadness in his eyes. "Sorry to hear that," he said, and collected himself. "That was a long time ago, but I remember it clearly. I was first on the scene. Terrible, terrible thing. My family bought flowers out here for years. After everyone moved away, they were the last people who came by that weren't trying to cause trouble. After a while, they stopped coming. Now this place is just an overgrown hole." I thought of the family visiting each year. I thought of long wilted flowers deeply saddening me. I looked around the park as the officer collected himself, looking over empty lots until my eyes rested on that particular one 2 doors down from mine. I felt the icy chill crawl over me again, but the officer's voice pulled me away. You're that boy. Never thought I'd see you again, let alone recognize you." "Yeah, I haven't been here since it happened." "Felt like I'd stop by," I said, peering through the light at him. "Well, I'm sorry I gave you such a rough time. I'm sorry about your friend. People like to come out here and cause trouble. Park's never the same after that, and once everyone moved out, it's been a hot spot for squatters, and I liked for a while. It's private property. The owner calls and raises hell every time he sees people out here. I understand you're paying your respects, but I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I'll follow you out," he said, starting to leave. Without much to say, I just nodded and rolled up my window. The officer started walking away, and I watched his silhouette shrink in the side mirror as he made his way to his car. When he reached the door, he stopped, his hand pausing as he reached for the handle. After a moment, he turned around and he started walking back. I waited for the mustached face to come into view and rolled the window down again. "Hey, kid," he asked, his brow furrowing a little. "Yeah?" I said, the air feeling chillier, a light fog rolling over the road. The sight of it made me sick to my stomach. "Back then, when the accident happened and I arrived on the scene, you kept saying the same things over and over. Green trailer, lady in the woods," he said, leaning on the door. "I remember," I said, but I'm not looking at him anymore. My eyes are held ahead. "You sure that's what you saw? Are you sure that's what happened?" he asked. I could feel him studying my face. "I'm positive. No doubt in my mind." "Why?" I asked, looking to the side of the road, to the darkness beyond the headlights. "Oh, when we arrived, there was no trailer, no woman in the woods, either. I asked every resident in the park, nobody saw anything. We searched for miles, thinking maybe you were right. Someone had fled the scene, even got a helicopter." "Did you find anyone?" I said, gripping the steering wheel. "Nobody." "Ah." In the dark, I traced the faint outline of something ahead. Rectangular in shape. "Yeah, but here's the thing. After talking to all the neighbors, we spoke to the landlord. When we mentioned what you said you saw, he turned white. Almost fainted. Said it was impossible. Said he'd been running the park for over 20 years, and all that time there'd only been one green trailer in the 80s. He said, and paused to chew his lip. "Young couple used to live there, pretty young woman, drunk for a husband. Whenever he wasn't sunk in a bottle, he was getting into drugs. Anyway, always late with rent, always yelling and screaming at each other. He said sometimes when they fought, he'd beat her up pretty bad. She'd walk around the loop waiting for her husband to calm down or fall asleep. Said she'd ask for help from the neighbors, knocking on doors as she went. They helped at first, but it happened a lot," he said. "She would always go back home. They'd make up. Things would be quiet for a while. They'd always get bad again. Back then it was a different time. The police didn't do much to help her, I'm afraid. After a while, they stopped taking her calls. Not long after that, the neighbors stopped helping altogether. Just a thing that happened." The fog started to get thicker, but the officer didn't seem to notice. "One night, after an especially bad fight, he beat her up real bad and he left. Took the car, left her there. Landlord said she came out eventually, limping, her face all swollen, mumbling his name as she walked the loop in the middle of the night, waiting for him to come back, I guess, but never did. She kept walking, even after everyone put their lights out for the night. When morning came, she was gone." Through the fog, I could see the outline of windows in the rectangular shape, and the dark structure of a porch. "The police found her on the highway, hit and run. Nobody knows if it was grief taking hold or if she was just trying to catch a ride into town. Anyway, pulled the trailer from the lot and never put another one on it. Never allowed another green one either." I thought of Kirsten's scream, the floating baseball cap. "Oh, look, kid, I don't know what you saw that day, but I'm sorry. About the whole thing. I'm sorry you lost your friend," the officer said, patted his hand on the hood awkwardly. "Do you see it now?" I asked, pointing forward. The officer raised his eyebrows and looked into the distance. I watched as his face softened with worry and his eyes narrowed on what lay ahead. Without a word, he grabbed his flashlight and aimed it in the yard. With a faint click, the beam cut through the dark and he panned it slowly around the property. I watched it shine over the fog, and watched it shine on a familiar dingy green paint, ratty stained drapes, and a mangled figure at the end of the yard. "I don't see anything, kid," he said, and shut off his flashlight. I looked into the darkness, transfixed on what I knew was still standing there. Me neither. Sorry for causing trouble. You have a good night, officer, I said, and started rolling up my window. He looked like he wanted to stop me, but in the end he stood there and let me go. I drove past the empty lot and rusting mailboxes, keeping my eyes forward until I was through the winding road that led out to the park. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I was turning back onto the main road. Once I was out, the icy feeling withered away, and I was welcomed back by the comfort of green traffic lights. As I left the park behind me, I released my grip on the wheel, and I felt the tension in my shoulders melt away. I sighed exhaustedly, keeping my foot on the gas until I made it to the cloverleaf that led me here. I took the ramp quickly, knowing the highway would overlook the park and ultimately take me home. I didn't know why I took that way, whether it was just me being defiant, or maybe I just felt like I had to, or maybe inside the safety of my car I thought I'd be all right. Merging onto the highway, I sped onto the overlook and could see the empty park in its wooded sanctuary. Below, I could see the slow-moving headlights of the officer leaving. The fog and the trailer were gone, and with it, the mangled woman. I returned my eyes to the road just in time to see a hitchhiker walking on the shoulder. They walked slowly, leisurely, kicking rocks as they went. As I approached, they stopped and looked at me, slowly waving as I rapidly approached. It was a little girl with a freckled face and a red ball cap. When I checked the rearview mirror, she was gone. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I want to tell you thank you so much for watching tonight's video if you're watching on YouTube. Thank you so much for listening to tonight's podcast if you're listening on Spotify, and thank you guys for doing that thing where you subscribe, where you hit the bell, where you hit like, or you leave a little comment at the bottom or wherever you can leave comments at. I don't know, I don't use Spotify that much. And finally, I want to give a huge thank you to everybody who supports me on Patreon. This past year has been rough. I've been gone for quite a while trying to get things organized for my own life, and Patreon subscribers, you guys who subscribe everywhere, this has kept me afloat in turbulent waters. So I want to give a very special thank you to Jordan Humble, Diana Kraus, Disciple, Strategy Wolf Emoji, SullyMan, Brandon Mendoza, BrimstonePandemonium, Caltuna, William Wellington, Scruffy the Janitor, Brenna, LaQueda Canizales, Smiley the Psychotic, Jjenna, Dante Kinkade, SimbasBloodyMojo, Mephistopheles, CursepoxPrimarch, M, Jesus Cornejo, Yarghoul, VerbalHorror, Amber Clark, J. Kearns, Mike, himbojerry, CrusaderChocobo, Corbin Dallas, Estebean, Seclude, Salty Surprise, Red Shadowcat, Turtleman, Cryolinian, Mr. Marcus Blitz, Dirt Diver 030, Voice of Sand, Psychomel, Melted Lake, Tali Sue, William King, Sashi Suzaku, Croconut 509, Stricken, Freddy Krueger, Hades Nephew, Acid System, Sky Harbor, Nico Kyle, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, Daniel Polson, and Corey Kenshin. I really appreciate your support, and I cannot thank you enough.